Hello, everybody. It's Heather with the Leadership of the Heart podcast. And today it's a Friday for me. So I don't know when you'll be listening to this. It could be any day, but right now it's Friday and I'm looking forward to the weekend. But I am very, very excited to have my guest on. And that's Joseph Fortna. And he and I work together in a capacity, a coaching capacity. I'll just disclose that right now. But after I, have been interacting with him now for some months, I was like, I have got to get you on the podcast. The stories and the scenarios, I really couldn't be any more a leadership at heart or caring leadership examples, and not examples of perfection, because I hate that. So welcome, Joe.
Right. Yes. Thank you very much.
So where are you right now anyway in your leadership journey?
Definitely not arrived, though, as we've discussed, I know where I'm going. Definitely trying to improve, because you don't stay the same in life. You either improve or you get worse. And so trying to improve, trying to learn from new experiences, which I think is important, not just learning by reading or talking to other people, but by learning from experiences and, frankly, mistakes. So just trying to improve and get better.
It's interesting because as you and I always talk and think, just thinking about that continuous journey and how, we have to kind of not be hard on ourselves and for making mistakes or being perfect in any regard. But you happen to be one of the more emotionally intelligent leaders I've ever met. So that is why I was like, I have got to get you on here. And emotional intelligence really just means that we are more aware of ourselves, our weaknesses, our strengths, our biases. We're more aware of what's happening with people. We're paying attention to the signals of what's happening. We really work to maybe inspire people. We try to adapt as best we can, but we're not perfect in any regard. And we're well aware of that. And that, I think, is the brilliance and the beauty of you as a leader. So I'm curious to know, where does your drive to lead come from? Where did that start for you?
Yeah, I'm a fourth generation Colorado native, and both sides of my family sacrificed a ton to get me where I am today. One side were homesteaders in Como, Colorado. Have you ever heard of Como?
I have not, no.
Most have not. Tiny little town outside of Fairplay. The other side of my family immigrated and came to Pueblo, Colorado, and worked at the steel mill. And the amount of effort and hard work that it took to get me to a place where I grew up in a comfortable home in Adams County really motivates me to try to achieve and try to take the next step. I'm also very motivated by my faith. We've talked about that. And I also want to provide for my family. And I'm motivated to get my kids, I have 3 daughters, to also work hard and see where they can go.
God bless you. God bless you. 3 girls.
Yes.
The level of emotion. No wonder you're so emotionally intelligent.
Maybe that's where I get some of my patience from, but they are wonderful, wonderful kids.
Oh, that's awesome. That is so cool. So I'm curious to know, the people who report to you, how would they describe you as a leader? In their words, what do you think they would say about you?
What I like about this question is that it's what they think, it's not what I think. I recently went through a 360 review, and the words that came up the most were involved, mentor, helper, and problem solver. And I took a lot of pride in the word involved, because I don't want to be a distant leader. And I'd also like to tell you what I hope they would think, not just what I read, but what I hope. I am as you know, a seminary trained pastor that became a banker, and that is unique, and it's different. But I can't turn off either side of me, and so I'm always going to care about the teams that I lead, and I hope they know that. The thing that I hope is that they know that I actually care about their success and where they go and how they grow, and don't just see me as someone that's trying to lead them.
And what is your current position, I guess, in the company you're at?
Yeah, I'm a market executive vice president at FirstBank in the Cherry Creek area, and I lead a team of lenders, and our lenders build and buy and help people buy real estate and finance a variety of things.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's a it's a significant role. And I'm not saying necessarily a level of importance, but level of responsibility is kind of big, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and our team is excellent, and they do a lot. So I'm just involved in a lot, and yeah, like I said, they make it easy on me.
That whole saying of like, to much is given, much is expected, and that level of responsibility that we should as leaders feel as soon as, even if we're all of a sudden someone says we get promoted and we have 2 people reporting to us. At that point, we should sense a level of responsibility to care for those that are looking to us for guidance and leadership, right? And if we don't
Right.
feel that, then we aren't going to evolve, and we aren't going to fill the needs of our team like we
Right.
should. Right.
Yeah, and I just like I said earlier, in terms of the journey and where I'm going, one of the big keys for me is learning from each of them, because everyone that I lead is a great leader in their own right, and so I am always trying to pick up the things that I see them do well, and not just lead them, but also learn from them. I think leadership is a two-way street.
Oh my gosh, yes. The stories that you share with me often, but they're like, can you think of one or two that are most prominent where you learned what you didn't know, and how that was a blind spot for you, and how, and then that whole learning and then changing thing,
Yeah.
anything you can think of that you'd want to share?
Yeah. One significant one in particular. There was a point in my career, this was a while back, but there was a point in my career where I was really focused on myself. And I had to be. I was changing roles. I was doing something new. And I had to be focused on myself, and trying to frankly survive and do well at what I was doing. But I wasn't really developing other people, and I wasn't really leading. I was just focused on myself. And I read this amazing piece about the first African American NFL player to sign a contract. And most people know about Jackie Robinson, who is amazing. This guy's name is Kenny Washington. And Kenny Washington got beat up worse in practice than he did during games, because his own team didn't really want him there. There were some people that did, but there were many that didn't. And so the amount of perseverance that this guy had, and his ability to know what was coming after him and how important it was for him to succeed is just amazing. And the quote that I read that got me to just pause a little bit and rethink, he would say, "As you climb, lift." And I was climbing, but I wasn't lifting. I was doing my best to succeed and figure things out in my new role, but I wasn't lifting. I started to think about some of my favorite leaders, and the consistent theme about all of them is they developed people, and they were surrounded by people that were loyal to them. And you hear things and you read that it's lonely at the top, and I don't think it should be. I don't think it needs to be. The way that I want to be evaluated as a leader, and what I've tried to progress through since that time, is I want to be evaluated based on the people that I lead. In other words, if you like them, you like me. If you have issues with them, you have issues with my ability to coach them. And I just think we get caught up in production in this kind of current world. Everything is about production, and we think about what we produce, and we forget about who we produce, right? And the talent that we're able to assist in terms of their growth with. One of my favorite people to listen to on the radio is Mark Schlereth, and Schlereth always says that even Jesus started by forming a team. which isn't the way I started. I started trying to do it myself. And so I'm trying to learn from that. I'm trying to always focus on the team and where we can go together. And back to the climbing metaphor, every climber knows you can go higher as a team than you can as yourself.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's so true. I always, right when the pandemic hit, and I was kind of like, I had a frenzy like everyone else on the planet, right? Trying to, and my type of business just like went completely the way, except for my coaching practice, funny enough. And so I was like, oh, and right in the middle of it, I was like, I have to have this book to finish. But at the same time, I was like, there's so many goals I have. And I knew I absolutely could not get there alone. And so I made a decision to hire, start hiring a team around me that could do all the things I was doing that I shouldn't have been doing. They could do it much better. And they loved to do those things. And
Right.
so that was the other thing, is like I talk about finding the greatness in people, but like putting people in the place where they shine, where they like to spend their time, means they're going to love to do it. They're going to help you shine in whatever regard you're going to do it. So everybody wins really when we do that. So
Right.
do you have specific examples with any of your team members that where you notice like this person shines better in this area, or I'm not putting this person in this better place, but if I move them over here, they're better here. Do you have any of that you can think of in recent years?
Oh, for sure. And in lending, you you sometimes try to shoehorn the person in what you want them to do, and that's not the right approach. The right approach is to leverage everyone's strengths while at the same time trying to help them get stronger in the areas where they're a little bit weaker. Um, I find too, though, that you also want to make sure you're not putting someone in a spot where all they're doing is the same thing over and over and over, because then they're not growing.
Mhm.
So you can't just rely on what they're good at now. You have to figure out what they're going to be good at in the future, and not hold them back just because they're good at one thing. So I pretty routinely try to focus on using people's current strengths, but trying to figure out what their next strengths will be.
I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. But that means you're really paying attention when you're trying to say like, what else are they leaving on the table that they're not using that can help
Right.
them really shine and elevate themselves. Yeah.
And they surprise you. You stretch them, you give them an opportunity, and then they surprise you.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, good point. Where people were like, I remember trying to think which leader this was. Oh gosh, I can't remember. But in the book, I talk about that. There was one person that, oh yeah, there was someone doing marketing, and they were gonna try to put him in one other role, and the person was like, I don't think I can lead the whole digital strategy, and then he was like, I think it was Rob Pepper, that's what it was, and he was like, oh no, yeah, no, you're gonna do this, and they're like, no, I don't think I can, and he's like, no, you're gonna do this, and in the end, they did really well. They ended up,
Right.
they ended up moving on from each other some years later, but then that person now is in like a much more elevated role. But if Rob didn't actually extend or make sure that he could stretch his team member and see a vision further than she could see, it may have never happened. So yeah, it's a big
Right.
point.
Right.
So this is an important point in the podcast for listeners, where I want you to share a story of a time when you feel like you maybe weren't the best leader. You weren't the leader with heart. You weren't the caring leader. And I already know you. So you already hit yourself and beat yourself up a lot. So you probably be like, I have 25,000 of those examples, but I want you to think of the one that's the most, like you really think about that. Actually, at the end, when you came out of it, it really increased the enlightenment. The enlightenment was probably the most significant, maybe, of all the stories you can think of. Can you think of that kind of story? And then share the story
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah. And I mentioned that time when I just wasn't leading well, and was focused on myself. But you and I have also talked quite a bit about kind of formational leadership experiences, and things that form you as a leader. And so I did want to share a story from my childhood, actually, that just shapes me today. It's not necessarily something that I was, doing wrong as a kid. We all do a lot of things wrong as a kid, but just something that just really shapes me. My grandfather was a gentle giant. He was a large guy. He served 19 missions over Germany as a turret gunner, survived those missions, and came back to Lowry, Colorado. And he had incredible patience with me, in particular. But one day I was 8 or 9 years old, and he got really frustrated with me at a Pee Wee football game. Just kind of a funny place to get frustrated, but um, I was the biggest kid on our team, and a fight broke out on the field near me, and I didn't do much. My parents were products of, I was born in the '70s. They were a little hippie like and taught me to avoid conflict. And so, I didn't do anything, and just kind of shied away, and it quieted down on its own. And he didn't speak to me the whole drive home. He took me to his house, didn't speak to me, sat me down in his living room and just absolutely let me have it for not joining that fight. And the short version was, here, the way he viewed it, I could have ended it quickly and I should have been there for my team. And I wasn't there for my team. I shied away. So to this day, it's very formational for me. To this day, I'm always thinking about what can I do to help my team, and I'm never going to shy away from problems. I'm not going to shy away from we don't have fist fights, thankfully, but but I'm not going to shy away from the battles that we deal with. And I think leaders should run towards those things and run towards those problems and not away. So just something that I learned from my grandfather.
I love that. And I'm curious to know, is there a time when either you went too far in that direction, and so that maybe you even like it minimized the effectiveness of the team or what you were trying to get out of as a leader for your team because you maybe over advocated, or a time when you felt like maybe you did what you did way back when, whatever your grandfather saw, where you didn't stick up for the team, and how did you kind of smack yourself back into, oh, don't do that again?
Right. No, I think I make that mistake more often than I like to admit, where I sense some form of trouble and want to jump in. And there are times when you could stay away and your team will solve it on their own. They don't always need a protector. They don't always need someone to step in and solve problems, but that is a role that I take very seriously. And so, yeah, I absolutely make that mistake often, where I step in, and by doing that, you rob them of the opportunity to fight for themselves, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a fine line, and one that I'm working on finding.
Yeah, I know that's a hard one. It really is. Well, so now we're at the time in the podcast where you get to ask me a question. We get to turn the tables. All of a sudden, you're the podcast host, and you want to ask me, what is that question you'd like to ask me?
Yeah, this is fun because listeners don't necessarily know that you don't know my question in advance, and you don't. You have no idea what I'm about to ask. So it's a total blindside. I I like to talk about fear. I like to talk about fear because I think that unchecked fear holds us back in life. And I think that the greatest leaders have real fears that they deal with, but they know how to deal with them. So I have two questions actually. The first one is, I want to know if you have a funny phobia. I have a funny one. I have this fear of getting an eye poked. Like when I walk under trees, I duck and just have this strange poke. I'm curious if you have one. And then I'd like to know how you deal with real fear in your professional life.
Gosh, well, here's one thing. It's not, I guess it's not, yeah. I have my entire life, I've had probably, and as I've gotten older, it's only been a couple times a year, but I have this recurring nightmare that spiders are coming down from the ceiling as I'm sleeping, and that they're all around me. And I'll wake up with a nightmare swiping them away.
Right.
Don't know what it's about. People will say like they look at you in your dreams, they like, interpret your dreams and tell you, well, that's what this is. And so that is, I don't really know what it is from a psychology perspective, but I don't love spiders as a result. So I'd say that might be one. I don't really, those are, I'm like, ugh, and even smushing in them, I'm like, ugh, don't really want to do that. So that would be, I say a fear or a phobia. And then how do I deal with fears? I think at first I freak out like the average person, like I'm human, right? I kind of like, oh gosh, this is kind of, and then I have that a natural reframe that happens for me, just that comes from my childhood. I naturally just will say, well, wait a second. Like how bad could this be? How, what could be the, a way around it? Or is there another way to look at it? But that's not until after I freaked out a little bit. People may look at me and be like, gosh, she's so strong and so this and so that. And it's like, oh, I have all of those other times where things, kind of knock me off. And they don't knock me off as long as they may be the average person, but they still knock me. And I think it's just a matter of kind of reframing and thinking about what's the learning, or is there a way around it? Or is there something good that's coming from it? So I just start to go and do that process for myself to move past it, I think, a little bit faster. But yeah,
Right.
fear can be debilitating. That's for sure. It really can be.
Takes a lot of mental toughness to deal with it.
Well, I even think about like this, someone asked me, I was at a conference a few weeks ago and I'm sitting next to a gentleman, I didn't know him, but we were just talking about different things. And at some point I said, yeah, when I give I talk about my story and my talks, the talks that I do, keynotes that I do, that I always tend to like hold back. I held back parts of it, but part of it because I don't want to be standing on stage crying because I don't think it's very professional. And he says, why not? And I go, well, I mean, they're paying me to like give a talk and it should be uplifting. And I don't think I should be standing on the stage crying. That's why. And he kept going, but why not? And he kept asking it over and over again. And he goes, you really should make sure, this is a fear. So this is a fear of like, the fear is that I can't maintain, I can't keep my cool. So then that's why I don't go so deep that I could potentially not keep my cool and completely break down in front of complete strangers. So now I keep hearing him in the back of my head going, okay, but like people want to come with you on the journey. And sometimes that journey has a lot of pain and sometimes it produces the tears or the anger or the whatever it is. And so you have to let them into that. So that's a fear too. And that's something that I just keep hearing this gentleman who at that point was a total stranger in the back of my head going, but why not?
Right.
So I think that's a good way to do it too.
Right.
So for those who are listening now who, taken away some good nuggets and are listening to, I'm sure they're listening to your heart. If they probably are like, oh my gosh, he's exactly who should be on this show. I'm so glad you brought him on. What might be a couple of words of wisdom that you would leave them with, that send them on their day to be motivated or helping them to see their leadership in a different way?
Yeah, I learned this from Brad Miley. Brad Miley is the CEO at the Denver Rescue Mission and just one of my favorite people. Brad always talks about courage. And courage isn't blindly running forward, but it is about not holding ourselves back. And it is about trying to be all the things that we can be and overcoming some of those fears that we were just talking about. It is about using all of our capabilities and not holding those back. When things get tough, being courageous is always the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
and I've learned that by watching him and other leaders that I really like. And people are drawn to courage. I know I am. People are drawn to courageous leaders. And when you think about your favorite leaders in business, sports, really anything, nonprofit, the people who are courageous, we follow them because it's exciting. They take us to places that we didn't think we could go. And it's not this blind concept of just pushing forward no matter what. It's about leveraging what we were gifted with and trusting in ourselves and our own abilities and those around us. So I've been thinking a lot lately about what it means to be a courageous leader and not just not just with the leadership abilities that I was born with and am working on, but also to be a courageous one.
Mm. Oh, that's good. That's really good. And I can think about things that we've talked about that I see that courage in action, because courage also means like admitting when we're not right, admitting when we don't know it all. And by the way, we endear our people to us, the more we make those admissions. Now, I'm not saying making those admissions 25 times a day, because that obviously after a while that gets stale, right? But if we are people who make kind of the average amount of mistakes, then it's okay to be the one that admits it. And also the one that just says like, I need to go skill myself up. I don't know this thing. I need to learn this thing. And I know you're a leader who does that. It's so important for us if we want to be known as leaders of the heart. So
Right.
I appreciate you, Joe. So anybody who's listening right now, if you felt like there was just a lot of good nuggets you took with you, make sure you share this episode far and wide. And also don't forget to write a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen, because this is exactly what the stuff that leaders need to hear more of. I really hope we can get it in the hands of the leaders who need a little bit of extra pushing to become more emotional, intelligent. But sometimes it'll be us too. We all need help every single day. So definitely go do that. And again, Joe, this has been awesome. I'm so glad I had you on here. It's been great.
Well, thank you again for everything you've done for me. And thank you for having me on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
And thanks everybody for listening to Leadership with the Heart podcast. Be well.